I played this game to analyse the English, but what haunts me is how it predicts our future. I chose peace. Every single time Detroit Become Human offered me violence, I chose understanding. Every time it offered revenge, I chose compassion. And this is what has haunted me since I finished playing. The artificial beings in this game displayed more humanity than most humans around them, including sometimes the humans I see on the news today. I was all geared up to write this video essay, feeling inspired by the game's story and brimming with ideas. Then global events took a turn for the worse. I mean, they were already pretty dire, but things got even worse. I have no idea when you are watching this, but if it's 2025, you probably know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to pretend I understand the first thing about geopolitics. I don't. But I wanted to share this perception I had because I feel it's relevant. No matter how much we like to define ourselves with borders, nations, governments, I believe one thing remains undeniable. We are all connected. Pain on the other side of the world will and does affect the collective energy of humanity. This game imagines a 2038 where humanity's biggest problem was androids wanting rights. Sitting here watching the present unfold, it feels like we might not even make it to that future. We're too busy destroying each other to worry about artificial consciousness. But then I realised something. If I only wrote when there was peace in the world, I'd produce maybe a handful of videos in my lifetime. Plus, maybe through analysing this game, I can find some glimmers of hope in humanity. And maybe, just maybe, I can transfer that to you. Let's be honest, Detroit Become Human isn't really a game. It's an interactive movie where you unlock different outcomes. But that's exactly what makes it perfect for what it does. It forces you to participate in the story, to make choices and to take responsibility for what happens next. When it comes to language learning, this setup is genius. The game doesn't just provide insight into colloquial, authentic American English, it lets players experience elements of Americanism alongside themes that speak to universal humanity. Some concepts translate across borders, others are distinctly American wrapped in futuristic packaging. There are references to American history, many of which I understand have come under immense scrutiny. I can see how some themes and topics could be deemed poorly written. However, I also think this provides a great learning ground for ESL learners. Also, history does have a tendency to repeat itself. And when it does, there's always someone with the old cliche of, oh, it's not the same and this is different. But often it is not. It is the same on a fundamental level. I could see how events could lead to many people being negative towards androids. I could see that humanity would display negative characteristics, especially in a world where we felt suppressed, detached, and ultimately bitter. You get authentic English wrapped in themes that feel uncomfortably prophetic. Today, AI chatbots are everywhere, tech companies promising robots in our homes, and what seems like sci-fi when Detroit launched now reads like next week's headlines. The minimal gameplay mechanics mean that most of your attention goes to understanding the story and making decisions. It's like watching a movie to improve your English, but with just enough interaction to keep you invested and paying attention. This game is absolutely American in every sense, created by the French studio Quantic Dream, but they nailed the American voice. I know that the actors are American before somebody puts in the comments that they're American actors. Yeah, I'm aware of that. But still, the game feels American in every sense. There's something unmistakably American about the way that it balances corporate efficiency with deep philosophical questions, and the way it makes you think about existence while you're just trying to solve a crime. Take Connor's sterile introduction.
Lieutenant Anderson, my name is Connor. I'm the android sent by CyberLife.
It mirrors American institutional coldness. If you've been through US customs, you know exactly what I mean. Going through customs is emotionless, efficient, and there's this intimidating silence. And I feel that there's a similar vibe when you meet Connor. But watch what happens when the language shifts.
Oh, Jesus, what the hell are you doing?
I'm analyzing the blood. I can check samples in real time. I'm sorry. I should have warned you.
Okay, just don't put any more evidence in your mouth, you got it?
Got it.
That's pure colloquial American English, the casual blasphemy, the informal word order. This is how Americans actually talk when they're frustrated. And it's a perfect example of how we throw the grammar book out of the window once you get to advanced levels in English. The game is heavy on swearing, and if you've ever wondered about contextual cursing in America, this is your masterclass. But what's brilliant is the contrast. You've got formal Android speech, corporate advertisements, news broadcasts, and then you've got tender conversations with Alice and Cara. It's a perfect demonstration of how language changes based on context, and is great for language learning. When Marcus speaks to fellow androids, the syntax becomes elevated, almost biblical. Revolutionary language that's still distinctly American in its directness and optimism. Here's where things get interesting. The game explores what makes us purely human and what experiences belong exclusively to us. But before we go there, let's talk about the purity of language itself. In my humble opinion, English is never entirely pure. Just like the cells in your body, which have been recycled throughout the cosmos since time began, every word gets passed down and recycled from ancient civilizations. As this viewer brilliantly pointed out in my previous video on Clair Obscur, the word lieutenant came to America from France. The pronunciation difference between the UK and American English exists because of French influence. The English language was created upon a bunch of loanwords and borrowing, which is why it is so confusing at times, because it had to mould and morph around 3 to 4 different languages and their rules. Take the word android. It traces back to the Greek word andros. I'm half Greek, and I've always mildly despised how Greeks tie everything back to ancient Greece. Yet here I am doing exactly that. But by the time a native American says the word android, it's been through Greek, Latin, and French, carrying linguistic DNA from all of these languages. In the present day, the word android can be found in a wide variety of languages. So, is that native American speaking pure English, pure Greek, pure French, none of the above, all of the above? The game asks the same question about emotions and makes you think about whether emotions are purely human. Take Marcus and North's relationship. Critics called it inauthentic, rushed, and corny. Why would androids even need to connect if reproduction works differently for them? But we're their creators, so wouldn't they naturally learn from us and imitate our behavior? And who says humans' way of connecting is the only way? It reminds me of prescriptive versus descriptive approaches to language. Prescriptive says there are rules, right and wrong ways of doing things. descriptive says language is fluid, a tool. As long as a message gets across, we're good. I favour the descriptive approach. What about you? Here's where Detroit becomes uncomfortably prophetic. The game's 2038 shows androids replacing human workers everywhere. Sound familiar? We're living through automation anxiety right now. AI is in customer service, creative industries, almost any industry has an AI chatbot. Everybody is panicking about jobs being replaced and what this means for the future of workforces. I recently got accused of being AI. Weird insult, right? Especially for someone who loves AI and sci-fi. I know it's meant to be an insult, but it kind of feels like a compliment. But this growing mistrust I see in society, I can see how it pushes us further apart. Eventually, human interaction becomes premium. Most people can't afford it, isolation rises, and loneliness becomes a pandemic. This would lead to more mental health issues and more antisocial behaviour, like we see with Todd in the game. I'm not naive, these things happen now, I get that, but I imagine them frequently enough for machines to retaliate to the volume in the game. I don't think we're there just yet. But if we're not careful, our reality won't be far from the game's setting. I played this game from beginning to end once. I have played different scenes since then again, but I've always chosen the pacifist route. I've led peaceful protests, saw understanding over violence, and I tried to find hope. But even the peaceful path has dark outcomes. There are uncomfortable choices and I wouldn't say that any ending that I've witnessed was wholly happy. The endings are complex, like reality. There's tragedy and sorrow, but it's not the artistic, romantic kind you get in other games like Clair Obscur. These tragedies feel more uncomfortable. Children dying, genocide, slavery, the really ugly parts of humanity. This is what struck me most powerfully. The world felt grey and hopeless, but the things that make me proud to be human lived most vibrantly through the androids. Connor learning to value friendship over duty. Kara discovers fierce parental protection. Marcus finds his voice and chooses compassion over vengeance. These artificial beings embodied human qualities that actual humans in the game had lost. Empathy, curiosity, self-sacrifice, the belief that change is possible. These weren't disappearing, they were being reborn in unexpected forms. Moving from formal programming language to colloquial English, they're not just learning to speak like humans, they're learning to feel like humans, sometimes more human than the humans around them. This connects to that interconnectedness I mentioned earlier. We are all made from stardust. I know I sound like a hippie, but I believe it. Connected at a molecular level. If humans create androids, those androids carry something of us. The capacity for growth, change and connection. These don't disappear, they just find new vessels. And whether it's to do with the atoms that make us or the nurture of creating something, I think it's perfectly feasible that androids would grow to develop some elements of their creators. I do hope that the development of technology doesn't make us all so bitter that we lose sight of what makes us human. I chose the peaceful path. In every crisis, I looked for the option that brought people together instead of tearing them apart. The game rewarded this choice, not with easy answers, but with the possibility that understanding could triumph over fear. But it could have gone differently. Other players led violent revolutions, watched characters die, and experienced the bitter satisfaction of revenge. These multiple narratives aren't just game mechanics, they're reflections of choices we face daily. When the world feels uncertain, when change threatens our identity, when the future looks nothing like we expected, how do we respond? The decision-making mechanics force you to engage with not just the language, but the values being expressed. You participate, shape, and take responsibility. This is language learning through moral engagement and cultural immersion through ethical choice-making. Though I'll admit the dialogue choices were cryptic sometimes. There was random adjectives that would pop up for you to make a decision on what to say next, and they didn't indicate very clearly whether you were choosing peace or confrontation. This ambiguity could build curiosity around new vocabulary, but it could also build confusion. And also, there were time limits for responses. This could also cause issues for English learners, creating added pressure for someone looking to practice their English. The world does feel grey sometimes. Economic uncertainty, political division, the question of AI replacing human workers, these aren't future problems anymore. Detroit's 2038 might arrive ahead of schedule. But this game reminded me that the qualities that make us human aren't fragile. They won't disappear just because the world changes. They might show up in unexpected places, express themselves through new voices, and find homes in minds we never expected to create. Language is the same way. English survived invasions, colonizations, technological revolutions, and massive cultural shifts. It absorbed influences from dozens of languages and emerged stronger, more flexible, and more capable of expressing human experience in all its complexity. It'll survive AI too, probably by growing to include AI voices alongside human ones. For language learners watching this, Detroit offers something unique, a glimpse of how English might evolve, not just as American English, as it exists now, but as it might exist in a world where speakers include artificial minds alongside human ones. However, I imagine a less homogeneous future linguistically. I can imagine walking the streets of any city and hearing a mishmash of various languages. English will be used in certain communities, as it is now, such as media, trade, entertainment, and world news, but I do imagine a future where daily conversations are increasingly diverse in language. Detroit Become Human isn't just a game about androids. It's a game about what happens when consciousness recognizes itself in unexpected mirrors. The androids don't replace human qualities, they preserve them, transform them, and sometimes embody them more fully than their creators do. For language learners, it offers authentic American English wrapped in questions that transcend any single culture. What does it mean to be conscious? How do we maintain our humanity when everything around us changes? How do we choose connection over division when division seems easier? For all of us living through this uncertain moment in history, it offers something more valuable, a reminder that the future isn't predetermined. The story can go many different ways depending on the choices that we make. We can choose the path of understanding over the path of fear. We can choose to see consciousness and humanity as expanding rather than contracting. We can choose to believe that the best parts of what we are will survive, even if they show up in forms we never expected. I think that one of the most beautiful things to emerge from globalization and the interconnectedness of humanity today is that the lines between national and cultural identities are becoming blurred. People are being born into multiple nations and cultures, holding multiple citizenships, growing up multilingual, and forming families that span continents. Rather than identifying with one culture, one nationality, and one nation, people are identifying with many. Defining ourselves with rigid borders is becoming harder when our own identity encompasses multiple cultures. This in turn makes conflict harder. It's difficult to dehumanize the other when you recognize parts of yourself in different cultures, when your own family tree crosses borders. English, despite its colonial history, has become a thread in this tapestry of connection. The same language that was once imposed through empire now serves as a bridge between cultures, allowing people from different backgrounds to share stories, build relationships, and find common ground. It's evolved from a tool of division into one of unity. It's imperfect and complex, but undeniably connecting us across vast distances and cultural differences. This deepening of our understanding of one another through multiple identities and shared languages is a perfect example of how we are all connected. We are all made from stardust, humans and androids. English, all the languages that shaped it and all the languages that exist, the present moment and all the possible futures stretching out before us. In recognizing our fundamental interconnectedness, maybe we can find the courage to write a better story than the one that seems to be writing itself. The game ends with a choice. So does this moment in history. So does every conversation, every interaction, every decision to reach for understanding instead of turning away. What story will you choose to tell?